Welcome to FO Talks. With me, thanks to popular demand, is Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed. He is a great scholar on South Asian matters, particularly Pakistan, the author of The Garrison State, the author of Punjab, Bloodied and Partitioned, and the author of an award-winning 800-plus page tome on Jinnah. Few people know Pakistan better than Professor Ahmed. He's also an amateur musician and a decent singer. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Atulji. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. Today, we will be discussing, or we will be making sense of the new Saudi Arabia-Pakistan Mutual Defense Pact. It has been all over the news. We have been asked, or rather Strategic Mutual Defense Pact. We've been asked questions about it. And who better than Ishtiaq here to make sense of what is going on? Question, and number one question for you, is what is the history of Saudi Arabia-Pakistan relations?
I think at the time of the founding of Pakistan, initially in the Arab world, there was some hesitation about Pakistan. The general feeling was that it was something similar to the Zionist movement. But over time, Pakistan cultivated close relations with the Saudis. And
Let me stop you right there.
yeah,
Pakistan has long been seen as analogous to Israel.
yes,
And Israel was a Zionist movement, and the Jews returned to their ancestral homeland.
so they claim.
So
Yes,
and that's the story, that's the mythology.
yeah.
When it comes to Pakistan, there is no such story, really. So how is it analogous, sir?
No, both are based on the idea of religious nationalism. You see, there are two basic ways in which you can look at nationalism. One is the territorial base of nationalism, that all those who are born on a certain territory are ipso facto members of the nation, irrespective of their religion, their ethnicity, the languages they speak, and they are entitled to equal rights as citizens. In contrast to that, there is the Germanic approach to nationalism, which is that you are part of a nation because of a distinctive cultural particularity. And that would mean, in the case of the Germans, initially the idea that the Germans were a unique culture by their language, this whole idea, this myth of the golden age of the Valhalla spirit, undefiled by modernity and all that. And then come all the foreigners like the Jews, for example, and they defile that German purity. And so the story goes on until we get Nazism out of it.
So it's race-based.
Similarly,
That is race-based and culture-based.
yes, the Jews initially have always believed in a prayer, "Oh Lord, next year in Jerusalem." But that Jerusalem was a spiritual sort of thing. To make it a profane idea belonging to a particular place in the Middle East is what Theodor Herzl brought forward. And the idea was that this land was given by God to the Jews and should belong to them. And so people who are living there have to either give up their presence or live under whatever the Zionist state would allow them under the circumstances. So the similarity is that both originate in a religious basis of nationalism, which is a variation of the racial theory of nationalism, a distinct cultural particularity, and on such a basis you claim that this territory belongs to us. The Muslim League, you came up with this idea that those parts of the subcontinent in which Muslims were in a majority should be separated from the rest of India and given to Pakistan. So that's the same argument. And the and Sikhs who lived in what became Pakistan had to run for their life, which is what happened also to the Palestinians.
So, in a nutshell, the idea of Muslims in the Indian subcontinent being a separate nation, that is
Yes,
the underlying idea of Pakistan. And just as Jews were construed as a separate nation, that's the underlying idea of Israel. Why were Arab nations, young Arab nations, of course, they were all part of the Ottomans until World War
yeah.
One, so nervous about this idea? What's so revolutionary? What's so path-breaking? Why is the House of Saud a little bit uneasy in 1947
About what?
about the idea of Pakistan?
No, they thought that the way Pakistan was being claimed on the basis of a religious nationalism to divide India, the subcontinent, was something what the Zionists were trying to do in the Middle East. So that's the way the Arab nationalists perceived what was going on in the Indian subcontinent. And Nehru was invited to Saudi Arabia very soon after India became independent. And they addressed him as Sayyidna Nehru, the great leader Nehru. It's only over time when when the Cold War sort of started taking root over world politics, and Pakistan joined the Western alliances, and Saudi Arabia sided with the Americans and the British, in contrast to the Arab nationalists of Egypt and Iraq and Syria. It's at that time that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia started cultivating mutually in good relations, I would say.
Got it.
Which over, yeah, yeah.
When exactly does this kick off? What is the year or what is the decade?
I would say in the 50s already, the Saudis started recruiting Pakistanis to, to do jobs like the sanitary department and other services. I'm not sure how many Indians were who came at that time, but Pakistanis uh, started living in Saudi Arabia from the 1950s into the 60s, when the Cold War actually becomes sharper. We find that uh, the Western people were supporting Islamic fundamentalism vis-a-vis the radical Arab nationalism. So Saudi Arabia fitted into that category, and Pakistan also leaned in that direction. But it's in the 70s, I would say, when Bhutto gave every Pakistani a chance to go out and seek a future.
We are
And
talking, just so that our viewers and listeners understand, about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the man who created the Bhutto dynasty, the man who
yes,
was prime minister in the 70s
that's
and
correct.
was a really consequential leader of Pakistan. He brought in
Correct.
socialism as well as Islamism. Under his reign, we had dry messes, as Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed has pointed out in his earlier videos. He
Yeah.
also declared the Ahmadis to be non-Muslims. And of course, he was deposed in a coup and hung by General Ziaul Haq. But the die was cast. The Islamist die was cast under Bhutto's reign itself. Please carry on.
Well, let me correct you here.
Okay.
The Islamist movement came as a reaction to Bhutto's Islamic socialism.
Aha.
So,
Okay,
in
I
order
stand
to,
corrected.
yes, yeah. So, in order to uh, uh, counter that, he
Mhm.
came up with this idea of declaring the Ahmadis as non Muslims to prove his own credentials as a pious Muslim. That's how it started.
I mean, he loved his scotch. I don't see how he was
Yes, yes, yes,
biased.
yes. So, he wasn't an Islamist by choice. It was more into politics. He was, he had to react to
Yeah.
the right wing forces in Pakistan getting under the umbrella of Islam. That's the main reason.
Okay.
And then, of course, Bhutto was hanged by a fundamentalist General Ziaul Haq. But by that time, Pakistanis in very large numbers were seeking their fortune in the Gulf area and in Saudi Arabia. And I think King Faisal came to Lahore in 1974 when the Islamic summit was held, and that's when ideas about confronting uh, the Zionists movement uh, gained greater popularity all over the Muslim world. And I think Pakistan got into this nuclear program. And from what I've heard, the Saudis were interested in this. Even Muammar Gaddafi uh, supported Pakistan in this. So from that time onwards, I think Pakistan and Saudi Arabia came closer uh, over time. At the same time, Iran, which was Shia majority, started asserting itself after the revolution of the Ayatollahs in
In
the Middle East.
1979. So let me
Yes.
pause you for just a minute and give context to those who are uninitiated about
Okay.
1979.
Yeah.
1979 is well remembered as the year when there is a revolution in Tehran.
Hmm.
And sorry, there's a military helicopter just flying overhead in Washington, D.C., where I sit. Hopefully, it'll pass. It's gone. So, talking about Islamic Revolution of 1979. That revolution's most argue, including retired CIA officers, was a reaction to the 1953 coup. That
Yes.
may be so, but by 1979, the Middle East is in extraordinary upheaval. You get the revolution, which brings mullahs to power, the Shah flees Iran, and Iran becomes a revolutionary republic. What is less well known is that there is a siege of the Grand Mosque in Mecca.
That's correct.
And in that Grand Mosque uh, siege, commandos liberate all the hostages. And in fact, um, there are Pakistani commandos involved. And SSG, you can educate everybody about SSG. The SSG commandos are involved. And after 1979, there is a real concerted effort to control Iran, which means that Saddam Hussein fights a war from 1980 to 88, backed by the West, which means that Saudi Arabia gets military aid. And in 1979, something else happens. The Soviets invade Afghanistan. And that sets the stage for Charlie Wilson's War, a great movie, which is basically America backing the Mujahideen.
Mujahideen, yeah.
And that money flows through Pakistan's inter-services intelligence. General Ziaul Haq plays a big role. And now the relationship between the Saudis and Pakistan becomes closer because volunteers from Saudi Arabia, like Osama bin Laden, start showing up in Pakistan and then go to Afghanistan to fight their jihad. Over to you, sir.
No, but you have given the sketch of how things moved in that direction, you know. A communist government in Afghanistan, a radical Islamic Shia government in Iran, and in Saudi Arabia, the siege of this mosque, you know, all this radicalizes the situation. And Iran starts asserting its influence through its Shia proxies in the Middle East, in the Lebanon, and in Syria, and so on. So, Saudi Arabia,
Just very quickly for
yes,
our viewers and listeners, Iran and Pakistan share a border. Iran and Pakistan dispute control over parts of Balochistan. There is part of Balochistan is in Iran, part of Balochistan is in Pakistan. And Iran, after 1979, also activates its Shia assets in Pakistan. So
yeah,
the relationship between Pakistan and Iran becomes tense because of many reasons: religion, Shia-Sunni divide,
yes.
ideology, Cold War.
Pakistan is predominantly Sunni, so that's the Shia is a minority of, let's say, 15%, and they were supported by the Iranians, and the Saudis and the Iraqis supported Islamic radicals of the Sunni variation. And so into the 80s, this sort of uh, you know radicalization, polarization continues. And in the 1990s, we have proxy wars going on in Pakistan between Iran on the one hand supporting the Shia, and Iraq initially, and then Saudi Arabia supporting the Sunni militants. So that's one period, but
And
more
also,
than that,
the King Faisal Mosque, tell the viewers about the King Faisal Mosque in Islamabad, because that is the national mosque of Pakistan and almost the
yes,
symbol of the relationship.
yeah, it's built where I think General Zia is buried, I think around that place. So in the memory of General Zia, this mosque maybe is associated with Saudi, you know, the Saudis remembering the contribution of General Zia, that sort of thing. But more important is that already in the 70s, Pakistani military personnel were recruited in large numbers by the Saudis and some of the governments in the Gulf region to protect them, the royal families, against possible uh, rebellion and so on.
So they become a security provider,
They
or
do.
some
They
would
do.
argue they provide mercenaries, whatever way, if you want to be
Whatever word you
pejorative.
want to use. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. You see, Pakistan, I have said that it's not only a garrison state, it's also a frontier state.
Yes, you've said that
Pakistan
many a
has its
time. Yeah.
Pakistan has its army to, um, offer for services to countries looking for them. Uh, yes, so Pakistan got involved that way, and since then, Saudis and the Pakistanis have had a very close defense uh, relationship, we can call it. But at one point, this became strained when, in the war in Yemen, the Saudis wanted Pakistan to commit its army, and Pakistan refused. But I think that now has been sorted out. The thing we should have begun with is why the Saudis and Pakistan now entering into a defense pact, and that
Exactly.
is
That's question two. We'll move on
okay.
to that. Why are they
Okay,
entering into the pact now? And
yeah.
what does the pact really say? But before that, a summary of what you said. I was making notes. Um, Number one, as you pointed out, the Saudi Pakistan relations owe themselves to ideology. Wahhabi Sunni Islam came to Pakistan. And as a result, Pakistan has cultural deference because it's an Islamic state. It has cultural deference to Saudi Arabia. And since Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, brought in the Hajj program, there is this huge draw to Mecca and Saudi Arabia. So ideology and religion, a factor binding them. Number two, as you mentioned, security. Pakistan's military provides security. The garrison state is also a rentier state, and Saudi Arabia rents it. Number three, you mentioned that Pakistanis started going to the Gulf, so I wrote down remittances and, of course, investment. Even the mosque is, in a way, a Saudi investment, and there has been other Saudi investment. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Pakistani labor, both low skill and now increasingly high skill, including lawyers, by the way, practicing Islamic law in Saudi Arabia. So these are the factors which historically have brought these two countries together. And my MI6 friends tell me there has been an unofficial deal that, and you alluded to it, that Pakistani nuclear assets would be at the service of the Saudis should they need it. And in return, of course, the Saudis, with their oil money, would give Pakistan money to run their economy. So that is the summary of the history of why these two countries are close.
Yes, what was agreed at some point is now explicit. Yes,
Explicit. So
yes.
why now? And that's the question to you. I, of course, have some thoughts, but over to you. Why now? Why is it
You,
out in the open?
you see, from the 1940s onwards, Saudi Arabia became a close ally of the Americans. And it is the Americans who primarily, and even the British, provided security to these regimes, these governments in the Gulf region.
Exactly. Very quickly, there
Yeah,
was a subplot in which the British and the Americans had a really intense struggle over supremacy in the Saudis. But Winston Churchill, lost out to uh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
right.
And so, whilst, yes, the British provided security to some others, the British were dominant in Iran. And in fact, the 1953 coup was thanks to MI6, and the CIA conducted the coup for British oil interests for ideological reasons. Saudi Arabia is where the Americans became triumphant, and that led to the petrodollars later. But over to you, sir.
But you know, that relationship has been called into question now by after the Israelis, they attacked Doha, where a Hamas group was coming to negotiate ceasefire with the Israelis. And once Qatar territory is attacked, I think the alarm bells rang clearly in all the capitals in that region
Mm.
that you can't trust the Americans anymore. If the Israelis want to commit aggression, the Americans will go along with it.
Yeah.
So how
In
to
fact,
counter that? So how to
in fact,
counter that?
the FT used the word deeply rattled by
Okay, whatever they.
Israel's military strikes targeting Hamas's political leaders in Qatar. Over to you.
Yes, yes. So what I'm saying is that it's only now that the realization is there that the protective umbrella the Americans were providing is no longer reliable, and therefore Pakistan, which was already there in this, in providing uh, security, has now been promoted to an all-out defense relationship, and so that's the reason why Pakistan, being militarily a strong country, it has nuclear weapons. Its army is a excellent fighting force, and they have served in this region. So, who would then qualify under such circumstances? An Islamic nation like Pakistan, with whom they share even the sectarian, affinity of Sunni Islam.
Got it. And there's been talk of Sunni Ummah coming together against threats, and there is talk of this alliance being
The
a
beginning of a grand alliance of all
correct,
Muslim
all
nations,
Muslims, and
something like
UAE and
that.
Qatar are supposed to join.
Yeah,
But
they are
importantly,
calling it the Islamic NATO. That's the idea.
yeah,
Yeah,
importantly, three countries are clearly targets, or three countries are clearly rivals: the Jewish state of Israel, the Shia power Iran, and the Hindu country of India,
yeah.
a subcontinental country, India. So for this alliance, thanks to this alliance, alarm bells have gone off in all these three, the triple I or three I's, uh, India,
But
Iran, Israel.
there is no chance Israel and Iran will join ranks. That's out of the question. I think Iran and Saudi Arabia, through Chinese mediation, have sorted out many of their problems, and things may sort of normalize between these two countries, despite the sectarian sort of tension which is historical and will always exist. Uh, Israel's role and its threat to Muslim countries in general, but the Middle East countries now, is too obvious for me to discuss. What is left is India.
Yeah. No, just
Uh,
we should very quickly tell people about Israel. What is new about Qatar's strikes is Qatar is a US ally.
yes,
Qatar hosts the biggest US base. Qatar has spent billions of dollars on buying American military kit. Qatar presented a $400 million plane to Donald Trump. Qatar's investment funds have poured money into American stocks and American new technology. They are big investors in America. And Qatar is a big provider of natural gas, LNG, liquefied natural gas to Europe. So it provides energy security to Europe. And despite all of that, and despite having Al Jazeera, despite conducting the World Cup, Israel still struck Doha and the center of Doha, the capital of Qatar,
that's
setting
right.
alarm bells ringing in Qatar that no one is safe anywhere, anytime. And this sent shockwaves in UAE, this sent shockwaves elsewhere, because the Gulf Arabs were thinking that they could buy their way to peace. The UAE had signed the Abraham Accords. They felt that relationship with Israel was normalizing. They were doing business, including in security realm, with the Israelis. In fact, a lot of the airport security, a lot of personal protection for a lot of these Gulf Arabs has some Israeli involvement, as does the surveillance they use vis-a-vis
But
their
after this attack,
yeah,
all that relationship is now
weakened, if not gone.
weakened. Yeah, it's deeply weakened,
Yeah.
and Pakistan now has a chance to fill that space. And Pakistan has the credibility of providing defense facilities to these Gulf countries, and including Saudi Arabia especially.
Yeah. And there's another thing that Arab diplomats have mentioned off the record to me. They think that vis-a-vis the US and vis-a-vis Israel, they always felt a little inferior, because even though they would invest or even though they would give money, they felt that they were not equal powers. Israel has far superior technology, far superior human capital. The US is the superpower. But with Pakistan, they have leverage because they actually bail out a failing economy, a bankrupt state. So Pakistan is very much more likely to be responsive, not just because of its cultural deference to Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula, but also because of economic necessity. And so they think that Pakistan would be a more reliable and pliable net security provider. That is
I,
the thinking on the Arab
I
side.
agree with you. That's true. And for Pakistan, this is maybe an opportunity of a lifetime to get out of its debt burden. If the Saudis can bail them out
Mhm.
and give Pakistan a chance to, you know, revitalize its industrial base, which is in a very bad shape, and Pakistan's economy can prosper. Good for everyone.
Mhm. So
Yeah.
it's a terrific diplomatic coup on the part of Pakistan, and and the question is why now? Partly because of the Israeli strikes, but partly we have to give credit to the Pakistanis. Diplomatically, they have been working hard behind the scenes, and perhaps the Pakistani army has pulled, as you said yesterday, a rabbit out of the hat.
That's correct. So, the way things look like at present, Pakistan's diplomacy has worked wonders, and good for Pakistan and good for these Gulf countries, the Middle East, because I think Israel terrorizes these countries. We have seen that happen now for 2 years, after that attack by Hamas. And so I think it's time for Pakistan to step in as a stabilizing factor. If possible, we'll see how much Pakistan can actually deliver. That remains to be seen. But I think if we come to India, Pakistan, how their relationship is affected, uh, would you like to discuss that?
Sure. I mean, what is your view on how this will affect India?
In Pakistan, they are thinking, well, now Saudi Arabia, if there is a war between India and Pakistan, the Saudis, because of this defense agreement, will come all out in support of Pakistan. I look at it in an entirely different way. I think that the Saudis have a heavy investment in India. They have had there is 9 million Indians working in that region. There are more Indians in Saudi Arabia than Pakistani, and the Indians also work at all levels in the Saudi state system, not in the defense sector, but in running the economy and so on. And relations between India and Saudi Arabia on their own standing are very good. In my opinion, unless India again commits aggression against Pakistan, the Saudis can be uh, a mediator in bringing India and Pakistan closer to each other to sort out their problems. Instead of them going to war, the Saudi uh, uh, relationship with the two can offset such a development, political development, and I hope that's the case. That the Saudis will help India, Pakistan sort out their problems through, yeah, yeah.
So, the view from India, of course, is one of consternation, and here's why. This pact means that an Operation Sindoor-like attack is now passé.
Which is only good. Which is only good. Yeah.
So, the Indian point of view is that, and this is
Let me say,
yeah,
this whole idea of Sindoor was already passé because of the Chinese backing to the Pakistanis. So there is no chance.
got it.
That now doubly there is no chance. That's what
Got
I'm
it.
saying.
Got it. So
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
get to that in a second. Let me
yeah.
explain the strategic calculus in Delhi and
Okay.
especially in military and intelligence circles. So
Hmm.
there's a huge nervousness because Saudi air assets are spectacularly good. Saudis have the Eurofighter. Saudis have F-15. The Saudi Air Force can buy kit. The money is not an issue. The Indian Air Force is far short of strength. The Indians have not bought any new planes in the last 10 years. And in the recent spat with Pakistan, the 4-day conflict, Indian planes did suffer. Now, the Operation Sindoor was intended to be a deterrence against terrorism. Pakistan practiced a policy of exporting terror to India, especially under Ziaul Haq, Operation Tupac, bleed India through 1,000 cuts, and has played a double game. And India has wanted to respond through muscular rejoinders. And whilst some of that has arguably succeeded, you could argue, the most recent Operation Sindoor, even though militarily India did destroy air bases and a lot of Pakistani military kit, diplomatically turned out to be a disaster with a capital D. India
That's
wasn't even able to get support of any African country, despite getting the African Union into G20. And Pakistan, far from being diplomatically isolated, is now very much in the good books of Turkey, which imagines a new Islamic caliphate led by a new Ottoman called.
So that is romanticism.
That is
Nothing of the
romanticism.
sort will happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's not waste time on these.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
do get drones from Turkey. So they have
yeah.
excellent drones from Turkey. They have massive Chinese military backing and
Yes.
Chinese military kit. Pakistan has become the testing ground for Chinese military hardware.
But Correct.
This is very good for the Chinese, who can then sell to others and say, look, our stuff is good and it is cheap. And even if it is not good, then they can figure out, okay, how can we make it better, because it's been battle tested. Now with the Saudi intervention, they have cash. And of course, Asim Munir has met Donald Trump for lunch. He has been to the US twice already. And of course, the US State Department has withdrawn the exemption of sanctions for the Indian involvement in Chabahar. So India is very much diplomatically isolated, both in its near neighborhood, where Nepal has had a revolution, Bangladesh had a revolution, and even Maldives isn't exactly friendly with India. So India is isolated in its near neighborhood. India has tried to run to Russia and China, but in Russia and China, there is a lack of trust when it comes to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and in particular Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, because both of them were particularly close to the Americans, and Narendra Modi was particularly obsequious to Donald Trump.
Yes.
And of course, remember that on a substantive note, remember that the fifth generation Sukhoi project, India under Narendra Modi cancelled that, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has long memories. So these are things that do not go away if you hold hands in Shanghai, as Narendra Modi, who's very fond of photo ops, does. He held Vladimir Putin by the hand and was huddled with Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping, for all his hospitality and red carpet welcome, has not released either rare earths for India, or, for that matter, magnets needed for lots of applications, defense as well as civilian. So India is largely isolated vis-a-vis the great powers. India does not have friends in its near neighborhood. And now Saudi Arabia hasn't bought India's claims to be a net security provider in the Gulf, despite the Indian Navy doing a lot of forays against the Houthis. Despite the Indian Navy being quite active in the Arabian Sea, and despite India having a pretty good navy, the Saudis have gone for an Islamic alliance, and India is left high and dry, and India's Gulf foreign policy has also failed. Now, for India, it is really difficult to accept Saudi Arabia as a mediator because of its declared policy of the Shimla Accords. So for the Indians now, they are very hemmed in. They cannot launch a military adventure against Pakistan. And Pakistan is the diplomatically fortified of the two powers.
I think it's not all that good for Pakistan. The Saudis don't want it. The Gulf countries don't want terrorism to be promoted because this hurts them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so India's basic concern is terrorism exported from Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And the Saudis can actually restrain Pakistan, convince Pakistan to give it up. So I look at this ultimately delivering positive results. And Indian alienation is partly because of its foreign policy not to get involved in regional military pacts.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't done it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
There is this Quad sort of relationship and so on, but nothing in a strict military pact with another country.
That is true. That is Jawaharlal Nehru's historic non-alignment policy. And on that note, a Pakistani former army chief commands a Saudi-led counter-terrorism force at Riyadh, if my reading is correct.
That's correct.
And Pakistan is definitely involved in the security matrix in the Middle East.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's an open secret. Nobody questions it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for India, then, the big draw for the Gulf is, number one, India is a big importer of Qatari gas and Saudi oil. And number two, India is a big provider of cheap labor and skilled professional classes for the Middle East. Particularly,
there is one advantage the very large number of Indians are not Muslims; they are Hindus and so on.
Yeah,
And
Hindus,
such,
Jains, even
yes,
Sikhs.
and such people are not involved in Islamic politics of any sorts. So they are the best people to have
As labor.
working. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I mean.
Got it. So that's the advantage, as in that there is a risk that you could have Pakistanis radicalized through the mosque, going and getting influenced by
That's happened
Wahhabis,
many times. That has happened many times. Yes, yes,
whilst that risk does not exist when it comes to Indians. So Saudi Arabia will eventually play a balancing game, and on the whole,
yes,
your view is that it's a positive thing. The Indian view
yes.
largely is that this is a terrible thing, and now India is diplomatically isolated.
Well, it's diplomatically isolated for many other reasons.
Yeah,
It
he
has it
mentioned
has
that
moved. It's
Russia,
not only
China, the
yeah.
US has
It's not
imposed
only
50% tariffs.
it's not only that Modi was cultivating or was obsequious to uh, Trump. The way he has given a carte blanche to Netanyahu, we have not seen India protest against the uh,
It did
ethnic
protest the
cleansing.
attack. It did protest the Qatar attack, though.
Yeah, Qatar, because Qatar and India have economic relations. That's a different thing. But
They probably
the
are scared of
Muslims,
Qatar cutting off the
but
gas.
the world is concerned about what is going on in Gaza, and there, Prime Minister Modi and his foreign minister are quiet. They have done nothing. On several occasions, they uh, abstained from voting in favor of uh, some of the resolutions which were passed.
No,
Only now
that
they
is
have.
true. But then you have to remember that um, Ishtiaq Saab, that Israel is the third largest provider of military hardware.
Exactly. So
And
remember that.
the
Remember that.
Pakistanis are also not making a huge deal. I mean, they've recommended, Asim Munir has recommended Donald Trump, as you yourself pointed out, for
Yes.
the Nobel Peace Prize.
So,
So
so
hypocrisy is a subcontinental habit.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be carried away by this defense agreement. I
Yeah.
think let's
No,
see
but
how.
there's another thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Forget India and forget Pakistan. The
yeah.
Arab states themselves have not supported Palestine, and they have not done so for a while. The Abraham Accords were basically Dubai, or let's say United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain's
Which are tiny. Actually, they
tiny.
don't really matter. They are
They,
only rich.
they were
That's
seen
all.
in the Arab world, in the Arab street, as selling the Palestinians down the river. In fact, most Arab states have not really supported Palestine. And so it is not just the subcontinent until, let's say, the Hamas attacks, which were dreadful and
Okay.
horrible and fanatical, and then the response, which was extremely disproportionate and continues till today, and
Yes.
the shocking comments of the Israeli far right, people like Ben Gvir and why just mention Bibi Netanyahu, and all of these, whom Joseph Olmert, who's one of our authors, and the younger brother of former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert himself, he himself is a nationalistic Israeli, but he has called these far right fellow Israelis nutters. And so that has horrified much of the world and has turned global opinion. And that may have hurt India in the Gulf. But I think what has really hurt India globally is the opportunism, the lack of a grand strategy, and the focus on perception management. It's all performative politics. On Modi's birthday, and this is important that this pact was announced on Modi's birthday itself. On Modi's birthday, Modi hired everybody and everyone to say happy birthday to him. Lionel Messi said happy birthday to Modi. His bust was blown up in New York. The taxpayer paid for that. His bust was blown up on the Burj Khalifa in Dubai.
Really?
That cost an arm and a leg.
Imagine.
And on that day itself, the Saudi Arabia and Pakistan Special Defense Pact was announced, the perfect birthday present.
Was it just a coincidence, or it was
I do.
planned that way?
I think it probably was a signal. I think that people have eventually tired of it. And Pakistan, we learned that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia had been talking for 2-3 years, and they were in intense discussions for a year. So clearly, it was a very, very, shall we say, pungent birthday message, which
Maybe so.
punctured all the hype on which he has spent millions of dollars. So India, in a way, has become a bit. It's become a bit of a Potemkin village under Narendra Modi, and therefore it does not have the credibility as a democracy. It does not have credibility as a strong power, because you go running around like a servant in front of the superpower and you stand for nothing. Number three, India has not been able to build either its economy and military. So it neither presents an attractive market because of its protectionism, nor does it present a strong deterrent. So I think India's foreign policy is weak because its bark was worse than its bite.
That's very well put. I like it, yeah.
All right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, two of us, one who grew up in India, in many places, and studied in Lucknow, the great Shia city set up by an Iranian adventurer, and sitting in Washington, and another who grew up in Lahore, another great city, a Mughal city with a red fort, and sitting in Stockholm, have said our pieces. If you like what we've said, if you want to hear us more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please like this video and make sure you sign up to our newsletters. And we will see you before too long, making sense of many of the convoluted, complicated issues of the world. Make sense of the world. Follow Fair Observer.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.